Hello, our dear viewers, and welcome to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In today's edition, we are going to tackle the U.S.-Chinese trade war and its repercussion not only on these two countries but on the whole world. That would be our debate for tonight. But as usual, we'll start with the top stories, where President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received the general manager of the Russian Atomic Energy Authority, Rostom, Alexei Lokhenkov, on Tuesday. The two sides probed the construction development of Al Dab'a nuclear power plant, which is allocated for civil usage. The meeting comes within the framework of the Russian officials' visit to Egypt to sign with the Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy the agreement between Egypt and Russia concerning Al Dab'a nuclear power plant and its regular systems of security. Prime Minister Dr. Mostafa said Egypt is committed to achieving the objectives of the UN Framework Agreement on Climate and Paris Climate Agreement. Speaking at the closing session of the 17th BRICS Summit, Madbouli said Egypt had given great weight to developing the healthcare system, the medical services during the past years. Earlier, the Prime Minister said the summit in Brazil comes at a time when the world is witnessing intricate and complex crises and challenges amid a remarkable degradation in multilateral action and in the international order efficiency. As part of his participation at two-day summit for emerging economies on behalf of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the Prime Minister addressed a session on boosting multilateralism, economic and financial affairs, and artificial intelligence. He said developing countries are suffering rising debt, servicing burdens, inflation, and difficulty in access to easy financing for their infrastructure projects. Madbouli asserted that these burdens grew more with the geopolitical conflicts and tensions in the Middle East that led to further challenges, including rising illegal migration, displacement of people from their original home countries as well. And moving on to our topic for our debate, which is China, which is navigating the delicate U.S. truce while affirming its trade consensus in this regard. To shed more light, we have the following story.
The U.S. and China are navigating a complex trade landscape marked by ongoing negotiations and shifting tariff rates. A recent framework agreement reached in London aims to uphold the terms of a previous Geneva deal, with both sides potentially rolling back export controls and non-tariff countermeasures. However, concerns remain about the implementation of the agreement and the potential for future trade friction. The Chinese Commerce Ministry said that Beijing and Washington had stepped up efforts to implement what they had agreed during recent trade talks, but cautioned the U.S. against destabilizing their hard-won consensus. According to the ministry, China hopes the U.S. can continue to meet it halfway and maintain the stability of bilateral trade and economic relations as the two economic superpowers seek a resolution to their trade tensions. A ministry statement expressed hope the U.S. side would deeply understand the mutually beneficial and win-win nature of China-U.S. economic and trade relations. In three separate statements released in the past week about U.S. trade talks, the Chinese ministry called on Washington to preserve the positive momentum while also warning other countries against making a deal at the expense of China's interests with the U.S. Thanks to its trade truce with the U.S., China is not at risk of being slammed by higher tariffs when the 90-day pause on Liberation Day tariffs ends next week. But Trump's trade deals with Britain and Vietnam suggest China may remain an indirect target, according to the head of China Economics, who added that it seemed that Trump was keen to crack down on the rerouting of Chinese exports by third countries, which had diminished effectiveness of U.S. tariffs. As a July 9th trade deadline for countries to negotiate trade deals with the U.S. nears, Beijing is keen to remind Washington that the success of the trade talks in London did not come about easily. Earlier this year, China retaliated against U.S. tariffs by suspending exports of a wide range of critical minerals and magnets during U.S.-China trade talks in Geneva in May. Beijing committed to removing the measures imposed since April 2nd, but the U.S. said those critical materials were not moving as fast as agreed. The breakthrough came during the London talks in June, with the two sides agreeing for a framework to implement Geneva Agreement that involved expediting rare earth shipments to the U.S. The United States has also taken actions to lift series of restrictive measures against China and has informed China about the relevant situation, resuming China-bound exports of chip design software, ethane and jet engines. Earlier this week, the U.S. sent letters to ethane producers to rescind a restrictive licensing requirement on exports to China imposed in late May and June after its official confirmed concessions from Beijing over rare earths.
Welcome back, our dear viewers, to shed light on our topic for tonight, which is the U.S.-China trade war. We are very much delighted to be joined here in the studio by Engineer Mostafa Nagary, the Deputy Chairman of the Egyptian Exporters Association. Thank you so much, sir, for being our guest for tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be with you.
Sir, the U.S.-China trade war did start, maybe not this term for U.S. President Donald Trump, but the earlier term, I do believe it did start on 2018. How did you see the start of such trade war between the two economic giants, and what were the main causes for this?
I think that the deficit in the U.S. trade was the reason for that, because as we all remember that in the 70s, the U.S. have launched the GATE agreement, and after that the World Trade Organization, and it was a sort of umbrella which can gather all countries which are having a sort of competitiveness to try to trade all together. And the U.S., I think, believed at the time that it was easier for them to have a sort of control, more or less, about that through this organization.
Yes.
But after many years, after 30 or 35 years, they discovered it was not the best way for them to do that, because at that time there was no China, there was no India as a big player in the world trade. And that's why they discovered that they didn't trade more, they didn't export more, they didn't manufacture more.
Yes.
So the deficit was one of the reasons. And if you just remember that in 2018, it was the first presidential round of President Trump, and he started to discover this, and he tried to stop, but he lost the election, and then the Democrats came, and the situation came worse and worse for the U.S.
Indeed.
So the deficit reached $1 trillion between the imports and the exports, and it was so difficult for him to continue in this way. So my belief, and I think others believe, that President Trump is trying to rebuild a new system in a way or another to try to keep for the U.S. its position as the main and the biggest global trade country in the world. But at the time being, I think that we have to go for some facts and some figures, if we can say. Both countries are reaching a level of about 6 to 6.5 trillion dollar trade a year, which both of them together is consisting something like 40% of the global trade volume. So this is we call them the main polars of the global trade and economy. But if you look to the U.S., the U.S. exports less than what they imports.
Indeed.
On the other side, China exports more. Now the U.S. is trying to attract more and more investors and manufacturers to come to start reform a new system of production in the U.S. Some people, they believe that it will not work. But at the end, this is the strategy of the U.S. at the time being. They are trying to attract more and more manufacturers. They are calling America to be again the leading manufacturer hub of the world. China, on the opposite way, is trying to push out manufacturers in several items. And they are calling a system which is called the China Go Global. It's called like that. And they are pushing a lot of Chinese traders and investors to go spread in the whole world to try to benefit from whatever high sort of competitiveness in other countries. That's why we are not away from what is happening between the two main polars. But at the end, while everybody was in a way to try to gather in clusters or in unions or in, together in blocks, economical blocks, we are really not happy to see that the main two polars, while they should gather the whole world together and to work in one unity, they are now in a conflict, and big conflict. And the game is still on. So we are still watching what is happening.
Sir, actually China agreed to allow and to speed up the flow of the rare earths to Washington, while on the other hand the United States agreed to lift the control on the chip software and on the jet engines. How do you believe this sort of agreement between the two economic giants could lead to a break of the tense trade war between the two sides, and are we going to witness more talks and more agreements between the two economies in the coming days, or we will witness more conflicts as well?
Okay, let me tell you that in general, U.S. presents 10% of the total global exports. And they present about 13.5% of the total imports in the global. On the other side, China presents about 14.5% of the total exports and 10% of the total imports. Okay? So after 30 days from President Trump started his presidential period, he started to affect the imports barriers and tariffs, new tariffs, to everywhere. Okay? Mainly, of course, the traditional partners to the U.S., like China, like the European Union, like Canada, like Mexico, like Australia, like all of them are traditional partners to the U.S. And it started mainly, the main reason was China, because China was the big partner, if you can say, to the U.S. At that time, they started by 25% and they increased up to 145%. China, of course, have to react, and they started to with 25 and they reached 84%. Okay, and they stopped. And now situation is going softening day by day. If this was the answer of your question, that it is a negotiation and it is calculations which go day by day. Because as I mentioned, that the U.S. is not only have the conflict, the trade conflict with the China, they are having trade conflict with the whole
It
world.
did spread.
While China is not doing the same.
Yeah.
It's trying to gather the whole world to work together. We have seen the BRICS,
Yeah.
and then the BRICS Plus, and we have seen the Belt and the Silk Road.
Yes.
There was a lot of initiatives and a lot of trials from China to gather and to try to reform a new system of economy in the whole world, trying even to avoid away
Yes.
from the super control of the dollar on the international trade. And we are seeing now that the strength of the dollar against the foreign currencies everywhere is reflecting inflation in the U.S. as well.
Indeed.
But this is the scenery which we have seen have been always in the trade complex. Everybody's trying to play with all what is in his hands.
Indeed. But, sir, we have to admit here that since Mr. Trump assumed office, the game was the tariffs as punitive measure or
Correct.
as complement for some allies is taking place maybe every other day. And we have seen yesterday he's issuing new countries with new tariffs, with deadlines. So how do you see this policy regarding the trade between the United States and the world countries as well, not only with China, as you have kind of
If we
mentioned?
look to the statistics which is shown by the Americans and according to the monetary control surveyors, we see that the deficit is declining. But the point from some observers is that if you have a conflict with the whole world, okay, you can have a conflict with China, but you have to keep the door open for other to try to replace the imports of Chinese. But at the time being, the situation, I think, have to be there should be another scenarios. But this is the point, the view of President Trump, and we are all there. Of course, thanks God for Egypt, it was only the tariff was 10%,
10%, yes.
which under the trade is not that much.
Indeed.
But I can tell you that for the last 3 months, the exports from Egypt to the US have increased maybe about 40–50%. So that's why even with the import tariffs, but because that for Egypt we are in a better position, let us say in the textile than Vietnam or Bangladesh or Thailand. They are affected more and more with higher values of tariff. So that's why I think that we call what is happening now, it's like a climate change. Everybody is damaged, but some countries are damaged much more than others. So that's why that we are less damaged according to that. We always keep a very good relation with everybody, with the whole world. So that's why the trade between Egypt and US is still continuing in a very good way, and also with China. We have seen, as we call, immigration from Chinese and Turkish people to Egypt for the last 2–3 months. They are trying to manufacture, they are trying to manufacture, they are trying to increase trade for export. That's why even in our association, we have, which we call it a duty for us, is that to try to attract investors for the purpose of exports. We are an association, meaning to take care of exporters, to try to support them, assist them, help them by several ways. But now we started to move more and more according to what we see globally, that we try to attract investors in the purpose of increasing exports. And we can see that the results, which was mentioned, that only in the first 5 months of 2025, we have reached about almost $24 billion. If we go on this level month by month, I think that we will reach by the end of 2025 almost about $50 billion, which is higher about 17–18% than what we have seen in 2024. So the situation for the exports is giving the sign that Egypt is having a better competitiveness among other countries. We see that the area is full of troubles around us, but still Egypt is trying to move more and more, and thanks God to all business people, investors, manufacturers, the cabinet itself. We are all in a one room, as we say. So we are moving all together and trying to facilitate more and more for investors and for manufacturers. And we have seen that the Egyptian currency against the foreign currencies are stable for the last 8 or 9 months, which give a hope for everybody to go into long-term agreements, which is the main column of the trade in the whole world, to go for long trade agreements. It's not only when you have seen that the currency is fluctuation, so you go only for a very short period agreements.
Yes. Sir, how the US-China trade deal is affecting the import, the export, as well as the tariffs between the two countries?
Of course, as we have seen that, let us say, if you go for the bilateral trade agreements from China and the US together, okay? The US exports to China about $8.1 billion a month, okay, which is in total about $142, $143 billion, while they import from China about $25.5 billion a month, which is almost about $300 billion. So you have to always focus and try to analyze what sort of items U.S. exports to China and what sort of items the U.S. imports from China. And what China is going to do when they lose a big part of the U.S. market. And they are losing, of course, now. So there is two alternatives, either to spread more and more to other countries, or other to try to invest in new markets and try to export from these markets. And this is what China is doing now. As I mentioned, they have the China Go Global, and now they are moving several industries and several services from China to other countries. So that's why many countries will benefit. But who will benefit? The countries which have stable investment environment and should always keep on giving facilities and should try to have a sort of stable legislations and labor law, good labor law, taxation system, good monetary system. So I think that with all of that, these countries will benefit a lot. Of course, Egypt is one of these countries, and also we have more and more a better infrastructure than before, and we have a better location. We are in the center of the consuming markets. So at the end, Egypt can benefit a lot. That's why the mirror which the business people can give to the cabinet is very important, and the cabinet really is always keeping the doors open to investors and to business people to talk and to try to facilitate more and more.
Yeah. Sir, to what extent actually the new trade deal has the potential to reshape the global trade and the landscape of the trade between both countries, and to what extent it might be of positive repercussions on many countries as well?
As I mentioned, that of course we have to analyze what we have from data in our hands. I believe that what we have seen in the last 4 or 5 months is positive regarding many countries at the time being. It depends about the ability to absorb and to receive this sort of investments. And as always I say that the investment is having a soft birth, and it should have also a soft departure. I mean, many countries always they try to attract, and many countries have a lot of programs to attract others. But at the time that you are going out, they make a lot of obstacles. And of course, at the time being, the hot money and the floating capitals are too much in the whole world. So that's why if you are going to attract, only give the easy birth, and then you have a hard departure, nobody will come. So the main, as we say, it's like the healthy trade. If you have two wings of exports and imports, there is a healthy also way for the investment that you have two wings. One is the easy birth and the other is the easy departure. So countries should try to facilitate to any investor who want to move in any time to leave easily. At that time, the others will come because they know that they are not coming to enter an environment with its own legislation, and then when they like to leave, they cannot.
Indeed. Sir, sorry for interruption, but we'll go for Al-Isha prayer and we'll be back to resume. So stay tuned. Welcome back, our dear viewers, and back to our daily debate with our dear guest, Engineer Mostafa Nagary. Sir, the impact of such trade war between the United States and China on the green agreements and the green economy, and how do they both, as a giant economic power, stand from these agreements?
As we see in Egypt, of course, that the green economy, if we can say that, the green economy is a sustainable development for everybody, because it is linked with the environment and it's linked also with the society, the improve of the life of the society. According to the two polars, of course, President Trump was against the green agreement when it was signed in 2019, November 2019. At that time, he was still the president in the first round. And as soon as he got to the second round, he withdrew from Paris agreement, the climate agreement, and stopped financing, which means that, of course, he is from a background of a businessman, and we all know that moving to a green economy, it costs a lot. It costs a lot, okay? It needs a lot of infrastructure and a lot of arrangements, and according to that, he was maybe under pressure to try to rebuild the American economy, and there was no time to go into channels, to go for the green economy and to build the economy in general. For China, they are on equal position. They are not against, they are not supporting, they are not, but at the time being, they are always in the global blocks. They are trying to follow, they are trying to give a positive sign of cooperation with everybody. But for Egypt, of course, the state started to take very big measures, because we know that the European Union has started this agreement, and they have rules to try to decrease the carbon emissions to zero by 2050, which is harder, very hard, and I think it will take longer time, because as we know that the right parties in Europe is more or less also not against, but I can tell that they rather prefer to spend the state funds to other social means and the channels than to go for that. But they are on the track, and we are all affected that by the beginning of 2026, we have to pay penalties according to the emissions coming from all the products which we are going to export to to the European Union.
Yes.
And I think that what we are doing now is better for the society, for our climate, for our health of the people at the end.
We are seeing actually the repercussions.
And as you know that the main sectors which is increasing and trying to cause a lot of carbon emissions is transport, number one, by far.
Indeed.
And then after that it comes construction with agriculture, industry, even if you are going to the oil field, let us say, and you are going to try to refine the oil extracts, it's also giving high cost of carbon emissions.
Indeed.
One of the major producers of carbon emission is electricity, because most of the electricity stations are depending on gas. And so that's why you cannot imagine what we are all facing at the time being. In agriculture, which is my main sector, I think that the sector is playing a very big role, because as I mentioned, that agriculture is one of the main services or industries, if I can say, that is producing carbon emissions. So we are now talking, I was in a meeting with His Excellency Minister of Agriculture, and then I have met with the European Union Program Commissioner here in Egypt, and we have been talking about trying to have a sort of benefit from the square meter of land with the decrease of consumption of water and to produce electricity as well. This will be another topic. I think it needs a lot to talk about it. But the country is moving. European Union, they are helping Egypt. They are helping many countries to try to move and to merge with the new system of the green economy. So
which is very different than the American path at the moment with Mr. Trump.
We are far away, I mean, in these thoughts, but at the end we are considering Europe is one of our main markets and main allies, so that's why we have to follow. And we believe that Africa is a sort of a hub for producing a clean and renewable energy, either through the solar or the wind or the waterfalls.
Of course.
So we have this benefit, and it's a chance for Africa to benefit from these agreements.
Indeed. Sir, we'll go towards this report where the new US-China trade agreement aims to de-escalate the trade tensions between the two giant economies. More details in the following report.
The US and China have confirmed details of a trade framework that seeks to allow rare earth exports and easing of tech restrictions. China will review and approve export applications for items subject to export control rules, while the US will correspondingly cancel a range of existing restrictive measures imposed against Beijing. US President Donald Trump announced that the US had signed the agreement with the Chinese side, while a White House official clarified that the US administration and China had agreed to an additional understanding of a framework to implement Geneva Agreement. Earlier, trade negotiation teams from the two sides, led by US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lefling, reached an agreement on implementing Geneva Consensus after 2 days of high-level talks in London, which stabilized what had become a fraught relationship, with Washington blaming China for slow walking on relaxing rare earth curbs and Beijing criticizing the US tech restrictions and student visa revocation, as the two sides view the rare earths as a crucial bargaining chip in future negotiations. Following the initial trade meeting in Geneva in mid-May, Washington and Beijing had struck a preliminary agreement to suspend a majority of tariffs on each other's goods for 90 days and to roll back certain restrictive measures. As Washington and Beijing work to dial down hostilities as part of the recent trade agreement, the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump has lifted restriction on exports of chip design software to China. All three leading chip design software companies were notified by the U.S. Commerce Department that the export curbs introduced in May had been rescinded. The United States cut off sales of critical software tools used to design semiconductors to China in late May as part of retaliation for Beijing effectively choking off rare earth exports, which reignited acrimony between the two countries following trade truce struck in Geneva earlier that month. Experts have said Washington's export controls on chip designing software or electronic design automation (EDA) software would have devastating implications for China's semiconductor industry, as they are essential for creating new microchips. The chip software curb was a brief escalation in the U.S. effort to ramp up restrictions on China's access to semiconductor-related technologies that began during Trump's first term. Their moves aim to prevent Beijing from leveraging American technology to bolster its military and AI capabilities. Just under 50% of American exports of ethane, which is primarily used to produce plastics, went to China last year. The U.S. Commerce Department has told GE Aerospace, among other companies, to restart shipments of jet engines to China. Both countries are actively pushing forward the implementation of the London Agreement, and Washington has informed Beijing of the cancellation of a series of exports restrictions.
Welcome back. Sir, indeed, the U.S. and China are major economies. To what extent this trade war and the imposing of tariffs is having its own impact on Egypt and its export as well and its economy?
As I see from the statistics that the exports have been increasing for the last 2 years in a considerable way, if I can say. And just before this crisis and this conflict between the two giant economies, but Egypt have set a program to try to increase the exports, which was launched by His Excellency President Abdel al-Sisi, was targeting $100 billion, and then they increased that to 145 up till 2030. This was the state strategy, as if you can say. And according to that, we have seen from this time a sort of stability of the legislations and more and more facilitation in some laws regarding the labor law, regarding the tax law, regarding the investment law. There was a sort of bundles of initiatives to try to attract more and more players in the field, if you can say. And as I mentioned, according to this conflict between China and the U.S., many of the investors, they came more and more, and they added to the national economy of Egypt, and the exports were increased from the point of the statistics. We have seen that according to the stable monetary system and some initiative, financial initiatives, which is given by the Central Bank of Egypt, I think that it is helping the market to move and to try to be more healthy. Of course, we expect more And we are, as I mentioned, that we are always in discussion with the cabinet and with the Central Bank of Egypt to try to have more initiative, financial initiatives to support the sectors.
Yeah.
But we have seen increase even than the limits which we were hoping. But many sectors are doing a very good role. I wish that the sector of the chemicals and the fertilizers can do better, because many of the fertilizer factories have stopped for a while according to the gas problem in Egypt. But on the other side, the government is moving very fast to try to replace producing electricity from renewable energy.
Indeed.
We have a state strategy to try to reach about 40% of the electricity produced in Egypt to be from the renewable. But I think we can do faster if we just try to solve some routinic issues. Will help a lot, and I think that the agriculture sector will be leading in this way to be a producer of electricity. So that's why there is a talks nowadays in the Ministry of Agriculture about that, and I hope it will end by a good news, which we can talk about it later.
Yes. Sir, how do you see the keenness here at this very moment from both sides, from the United States and from China, to reach some sort of agreement regarding the export of the rare earth material to the US and the chips from the United States, and easing here, or a sort of compromise for 90 days as the agreement is stating?
I think they will come to agreement, and this is the way of what we have seen in the last
So it's the start of an ease of the tension.
President Trump. I mean, always he tried to press to the utmost and then try to negotiate. And I think that he cannot replace the imports of China by any other country, or even to produce in the US. On the other side, of course, China will suffer a lot if they will lose a sort of about $300 billion export to the US. Which was a lot of, I think last year they announced that 700,000 companies in China are doing the trade of China, which is about $6 trillion nowadays. So you can imagine that some of this, part of this 700,000 could be affected. So I think that both of them is not happy. And I think that they should at the end come to agreement, but as I mentioned in the beginning, that President Trump, from many viewers, he's trying to rebuild a new trade and economy system in the global, to try to keep the US a part of a big part of the cake as they used to be.
Indeed, indeed. But sir, from your point of view, how the imposing of such tariffs, not only on China, but on many countries, and we have seen that imposing recently on South Korea, on other major countries as well as this trade war with China, to what extent these factors are affecting the pricing and they are affecting the consumer in the United States?
Of course, we are focusing on what is happening in most of the markets. It's not only the US. Of course, the prices have increased. There is inflation, as I mentioned, and they are in a sort of a way they have to go for programs of financing their producers and financing their manufacturers and their farmers as well. So at the time being, you know that a big part of the exports from the US to China goes for the soya bean. It's agriculture items. So on the other side, the Chinese are exporting cell phones, computers, machineries, some toys and games, and all electronics. Most of the exports from China to the US, some textiles as well. But if you go to the US, while they are exporting to China, they are exporting aircrafts, they are big vehicles, they are exporter of agriculture, crude oil. So you have always to analyze the products, and you know what will happen and how you can benefit here in Egypt.
Yep.
So analyzing the data is the main issue. I have to grade the information center and decision-making support. They are doing a great job because they are analyzing, and as we say that we are all in a conflict, trade conflict. It's not only the two giant economies, everybody is affected. Either he will be affected or he can benefit. So
but with these tariffs that Mr. Trump is imposing every almost other day, or with the new list which is updated very frequently, how do you see this strategy that we did not witness maybe ever before from any U.S. president?
It is the way that he should play the game in this way, because, as I mentioned, he's a businessman and he's a good negotiator. And
it is kind of trying to use this to pressure the trade partners.
If we always say in the trade that if I import more from a country, I am stronger than this country, not weaker, because I'm the market for them. And if I close my gates, they will be affected. It's opposite than we have been talking before, that when you export more, you are more powerful. Of course, it is the main. But if you lose a market, which is the traditional market for you, you have to look for other markets.
Indeed.
That's why also Egypt is trying always to spread and to try to open a lot of gates and to find new markets, try to serve a lot in the transport way, try to increase the capability and efficiency of the ports and the airports as well. It is all going in one bundle, which gives you a more competitiveness to trade and to export.
Indeed. Engineer Mostafa Nagary, Deputy Chairman of the Egyptian Exporters Association, it was a real pleasure having you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Sir.
It was a pleasure to me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And our dear viewers, that would bring us to the end of this edition of our daily debate. I'm Rabia Amini. Thanks for watching.